Where you go? Drop your phone.
No, I'm not.
Drop your phone.
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right, goodbye, Rici. Nice to know you. You gonna meet Jesus.
I lost both my parents that day. My dad died that day too. Because the person who did that to my mom and my father aren't the same person.
Patricia Birmingham 911. What is the location of the emergency?
I'm in Glen Lock, and we heard a loud, like 3 pops. Bang, bang, bang. So we went outside, and I looked, and I see somebody is laying on their back, and it looks like they've got blood on her chest and blood coming out of her mouth.
It was a quiet Monday afternoon in Spring, Texas, the kind of day where nothing ever seems to happen. But at precisely 2:36 p.m., a single gunshot broke the stillness. The echo rolled down the cul-de-sac, bouncing off mailboxes and parked cars before fading into a silence that didn't feel natural. Inside that calm suburban home, a nightmare had unfolded, and a phone, resting on a counter, had captured all of it. On its screen was the final 30 minutes of 48-year-old Patricia "Rici" Birmingham's life. Her body lay motionless on the floor, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the background. A gun rested nearby. The air was still thick with gunpowder, sharp, sterile, final. When police arrived, the first thing they saw wasn't just a crime scene. It was a story recorded in real time by the woman who knew something terrible was coming. Her phone was still recording, the red light blinking like a heartbeat that refused to stop. On the screen, a calm but chilling voice lingered. "You're going to meet Jesus." Then the sound, one shot, final and absolute. Before we go deeper, follow us as we unravel the tragic death of Patricia Birmingham. But first, support this channel by liking and subscribing. Your engagement helps us create more stories that bring light to the darkness many never see. Patricia Birmingham was the last person anyone expected to end up here. She was a mother, a successful Houston real estate agent, and a woman whose laughter could soften any room. Her life was built on faith, resilience, and a love for helping people find their own fresh start. She sold homes, but more than that, she sold hope. To her friends, Patricia was unstoppable. To her clients, unforgettable. She had grown up in Orlando, Florida, a bright, ambitious girl who chased dreams until they became real. From her early work as a cardiovascular technologist to becoming one of Houston's top realtors, her drive was undeniable. She had the kind of story people admire. A self-made woman who seemed to have it all. But behind her success was a marriage unraveling in slow motion. Carrie Birmingham, her husband, was older, calm, composed, and, in public, deeply proud of his wife. Together, they seemed like the picture of stability. Yet those who knew Patricia noticed subtle changes. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the way she hesitated before answering questions about home. Carrie's affection had soured into something darker: jealousy, suspicion, control. Police would later discover that the tension had been building for weeks. Carrie's obsession with the idea that Patricia was unfaithful consumed every waking moment. Every text she sent, every client call she answered, became evidence in his mind. Patricia, exhausted from the endless accusations, started recording their arguments. And that final video, the one found playing when officers arrived, wasn't a coincidence. It was her last attempt at truth, her proof, her protection. If you believe stories like Patricia's deserve to be told, where truth speaks louder than denial, hit the like button now. It helps more people discover the hidden realities behind everyday faces. When detectives reviewed the footage, what they saw was devastating. Patricia's voice remained calm, controlled, a woman doing everything she could to de-escalate a storm. Carrie's voice trembled between anger and conviction, repeating accusations that made no sense. The recording stretched on, 30 minutes of emotional warfare before ending in one final act of irreversible violence. Neighbors recalled hearing only that single shot. No screams, no struggle, just silence after impact. A woman who once filled every space with warmth had vanished in an instant. When police handcuffed Carrie, he looked almost confused, as though his own rage had surprised him. He didn't resist. He didn't cry. He simply asked, over and over, "Is she gone?" That day, a quiet suburban neighborhood became the center of one of the most disturbing domestic homicide cases in Texas history. Not just because of how Patricia died, but because she had recorded her own death, knowing deep down that the man she loved might one day become her killer. Before we continue this story, take a second to subscribe to Sinister Tales. More than half of our viewers watch without subscribing, but your support keeps stories like Patricia's alive and helps us shine a light on the victims the world forgets. Because as her phone proved, sometimes the most powerful witness is the one who never makes it out alive. Before she became a headline or a hashtag, Patricia Rici Birmingham was a woman people admired, radiant, ambitious, and endlessly kind. Her story didn't begin with tragedy. It began with perseverance. Born in Orlando, Florida, in 1972, Patricia was the kind of child who seemed to glow with purpose. She was bright, curious, and deeply loyal to the people she loved. Her mother, Mildred Diane Estes, often said she had an old soul, a natural protector even when she was small. Her sister, Mary, would later describe her as the heartbeat of their family, the one who could turn chaos into calm with nothing more than her smile. From the beginning, Patricia worked hard for everything she had. She studied medicine after high school, eventually becoming a cardiovascular technologist, a career that demanded both precision and empathy. Patients remembered her not for her title, but for her warmth, for the way she held their hand when fear crept in. But Patricia wanted more than a stable job. She wanted freedom, success, a life built by her own design. That drive led her to Texas, first Dallas, then Houston, where she reinvented herself as a real estate agent. It was a risk, but Patricia was never afraid of new beginnings. Within a few years, she became one of Houston's most respected realtors. Her colleagues say she had a gift. She didn't just sell homes. She made people believe they were starting new lives. At award ceremonies, she was often the last to leave, not because she craved attention, but because she wanted to thank everyone personally. She was that kind of woman, the one who wrote handwritten notes to clients, remembered birthdays, and prayed with families before their first closings. Her success wasn't luck. It was grit. But what people didn't see, what the glossy photos and smiling social media posts didn't reveal, was the growing storm inside her home. She met Carrie Birmingham through mutual friends. To outsiders, they seemed perfectly matched. He was calm, mature, financially stable. She was lively, generous, and deeply devoted. Together, they appeared to have balance, the kind of marriage people envy. But balance can hide imbalance. Stability can disguise control. If you believe that behind every perfect photo there's a story worth uncovering, take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us keep revealing the human stories the headlines often bury. Over time, small cracks appeared. Friends began to notice that Patricia's once vibrant laugh was quieter. She canceled more plans. Her phone, which used to buzz with clients and friends, now rarely left her hand, not out of habit, but fear. Carrie's concern about her work hours turned to suspicion. His questions, once casual, became interrogations. He wanted to know who she was with, what she was doing, why she smiled at certain people. He began showing up unannounced at her open houses. And though she never told her friends the full truth, they sensed it, that something had shifted from love to control. Patricia never saw herself as a victim. She was strong, accomplished, and proud. But even the strongest hearts can be worn down by fear disguised as affection. Carrie's jealousy, like a slow leak, drained her spirit drop by drop. Still, she stayed. For peace. For her daughter, Olivia. For the belief that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She prayed harder, worked longer, smiled wider, doing everything she could to hold together a life that was quietly falling apart. If you've ever known someone who kept smiling through pain, share this story. Let their courage be seen. Let Patricia's voice travel farther than fear ever could. By 2021, the tension had grown unbearable. Patricia confided in a friend that she had begun recording her arguments with Carrie, not because she planned to leave him yet, but because she needed proof. Proof that she wasn't imagining the danger. Proof that her kindness wasn't weakness. She told that friend, "I just want him to stop." But he didn't stop. And on that final morning in December, she placed her phone in the corner of the room and pressed record. The woman who had once helped others build their dream homes was now living inside her own nightmare. Yet even in those moments of fear, she remained calm. That was Patricia, graceful even as the ground gave way beneath her feet. Follow us as we continue to uncover how love turned lethal inside the Birmingham home. And before we move on, make sure you're subscribed to Sinister Tales. It costs nothing, but it means everything to us. It helps us tell the stories that victims like Patricia can no longer tell for themselves. Because what happened next would expose just how fragile safety can be when the danger lives inside your own home. By late 2021, Patricia Birmingham's life was split between two worlds. The one she showed the public, full of clients, closings, and confidence, and the one behind closed doors, where every word she spoke felt like walking through a minefield. Those who knew her noticed it first in her eyes. Patricia had always been animated, expressive, but now her eyes told a quieter story of exhaustion, caution, and unspoken fear. She would laugh at gatherings, but check her phone too often. She'd turn down invitations, saying she was tired. But friends could sense it wasn't fatigue, it was isolation. Carrie's jealousy had evolved into obsession. He studied her like a detective tracking a suspect. Every message, every late showing, every unanswered call became fuel for his paranoia. Patricia tried to reason with him, tried to love him through the storm. But reason doesn't calm a man consumed by delusion. The arguments grew more frequent. Sometimes it was shouting. Sometimes it was just silence, the kind that filled the room like smoke. Patricia, once full of energy, began shrinking into herself. She went to work every day with the same professionalism, but when she returned home, she stepped into tension so thick it was suffocating. And yet, she still hoped. If you believe that even the strongest people can be trapped by hope, pause for a moment and like this video. It helps us reach more viewers who might need to see the hidden truths behind stories like Patricia's. Carrie's control became methodical. He checked her mileage, questioned her work trips, scrolled through her texts while she slept. He wanted to know everything, yet refused to believe anything she said. In his mind, Patricia wasn't a wife anymore. She was an idea, something he needed to control to feel whole again. Olivia, their daughter, saw the tension too. She didn't fully understand it, but she felt it, the way the air changed when her parents were in the same room. She heard the sharp edge in Carrie's tone, saw the look of quiet fear in her mother's eyes. She told friends later that she thought her parents were just fighting, not realizing those fights were warning signs of something far darker. Patricia, meanwhile, began preparing quietly. She didn't leave, but she started recording. At first, it was just audio, short clips on her phone. Later, she started recording video too. She didn't do it out of paranoia. She did it because she needed to remember the truth. Victims of emotional abuse often start to question their own sanity, and Patricia wanted proof that what she was enduring was real. If you're still with us, hit subscribe. More than half of the people who watch Sinister Tales never subscribe, but your support gives voice to victims whose stories might otherwise vanish. Her friends began noticing subtle red flags. Patricia stopped wearing her favorite colors, the bright dresses she loved. She stopped talking about plans for the future. She avoided mentioning Carrie altogether. When someone brought him up, her smile froze, just for a second, before she'd change the subject. And then came the silence, the kind that's too calm to be normal. Patricia stopped confiding in anyone. She moved through her days like someone bracing for an inevitable storm. She smiled for her clients, but when she got home, her voice was different. Lower, careful, restrained. Those who study domestic violence often say that the most dangerous time for a victim isn't when the abuse begins. It's when they decide to take back control. Patricia had started recording. That was her first step toward reclaiming power. But Carrie could feel it. He sensed her pulling away. And for men like him, losing control isn't just painful, it's unthinkable. If this story makes your heart race, share it, because sometimes awareness is the only warning someone else might get before it's too late. As December approached, Patricia grew quieter still. She told one close friend that she'd been filming their arguments, that she needed evidence in case something ever happened. The friend told her to leave, to take Olivia and go. But Patricia hesitated. She said she wasn't ready. No one knew those recordings would become her last words to the world. The red flags were everywhere: emotional manipulation, relentless jealousy, unpredictable rage. But when love has already been invested, it's hard to see red when you're still hoping for blue skies. And so Patricia stayed, not because she was blind, but because she believed people could change, because she believed her husband wouldn't kill her. But he would. And on that final morning in December, she pressed record one last time and captured the truth no one wanted to believe. Stay with us. The next part of this story reveals how that final recording changed everything. But before we continue, hit that notification bell. Because on Sinister Tales, every story we tell carries a lesson that might one day save a life. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters don't live in shadows, they live across the dinner table. December 6th, 2021. The morning began like any other inside the Birmingham home in Spring, Texas. The sky was clear, the neighborhood quiet, and Patricia was preparing for another long day of work. Her phone buzzed with messages from clients, listings to finalize, appointments to confirm. She was steady, focused, trying to keep her life normal. But that morning, nothing about her home was normal anymore. Carrie had been pacing since dawn. His paranoia had grown unbearable. He was convinced Patricia was lying to him, that she was seeing someone else. There was no proof, no message, no photo, just the noise in his own head feeding on jealousy. Patricia had tried everything: reason, reassurance, prayer, but nothing could calm him anymore. That day, she sensed something was different. His anger wasn't loud, it was quiet, simmering, the kind that scares you more than shouting ever could. So she did what she had done before. She pressed record on her phone. Maybe for protection, maybe for evidence, maybe just to remind herself that she wasn't imagining this. The footage that followed would later haunt detectives, attorneys, and jurors alike. It begins like any ordinary argument: raised voices, back-and-forth accusations, the weary tone of a woman trying to reason with a man lost inside his own madness. He accused. She denied. Again and again, for almost 30 minutes. Then the pacing stopped. There was a moment of stillness, heavy, suffocating. Then came the words that would echo forever. "You're going to meet Jesus." One gunshot, the sound of Patricia's body hitting the floor, and then silence. If you're watching this and your heart just dropped, take a breath, and please, like this video. Not for numbers, but because stories like Patricia's deserve to be seen. It helps more people understand how fast love can turn deadly. The camera never wavered.
It kept recording as Carrie stood over her, his breathing uneven, his voice trembling as he muttered words no one could understand. The video continued for several minutes, a portrait of aftermath, confusion, shock, and something colder, indifference. When police arrived, the scene was disturbingly calm. Patricia lay motionless on the floor. The phone was still recording, still capturing fragments of sound. Boots against tile, police radios crackling, a whispered prayer from one of the first responders. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. Carrie didn't flee. He didn't cry out. He sat on the couch, staring at nothing, his hands trembling just slightly. When an officer asked him what happened, he simply said, "It just happened." It hadn't just happened. It was built moment by moment, a slow erosion of love into obsession, of jealousy into rage. That gun didn't fire itself. And Patricia, calm even in her last breath, had done everything right, recorded the danger, stayed rational, stayed human. Her body was taken away under the soft flash of police lights as the sun set on that Texas street. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, unable to believe that the woman who had once waved to them, smiling on her morning walks, was now gone. If you're still here, it means this story has touched you, and that matters. Subscribe to Sinister Tales so more voices like Patricia's can reach those who need to hear them. What we do here isn't just storytelling. It's truth-telling. As detectives pieced together the evidence, the truth was undeniable. The video captured everything. Not just the act, but the intent. The calm before the violence, the deliberate movement, the pull of the trigger. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't sudden passion. It was murder. And yet, the real shock wouldn't come until much later, when the justice system looked at this video, at this moment frozen in time, and called it something far less than what it was. Because in Texas, even when you kill someone on camera, the law can still call it love turned tragic. Before we uncover how justice failed Patricia Birmingham, take a moment to comment, "Justice for Patricia." Every comment pushes this story further. Every click helps spread awareness to stop the next tragedy before it happens. The truth was clear, but justice, that was about to get complicated. When the police entered the Birmingham home, the first thing that struck them wasn't the blood on the floor, it was the silence. That kind of silence doesn't belong in a home. It belongs in aftermaths. A phone still recording. A gun cooling near the sink. A man sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. Carrie Birmingham didn't run. He didn't shout for help. He sat there like a man waiting for a clock to start again. Officers cuffed him gently, almost cautiously, unsure if they were dealing with grief or guilt. But they'd soon realize it was both, twisted together. At the station, Carrie's story shifted like sand. He said it was an accident. Then he said Patricia came at him. Then he said it was the heat of the moment, a crime of passion. Each version contradicted the last. But detectives already knew the truth. Patricia had left them a witness, her phone. If you're watching this far, it means you care about justice. So before we continue, take a second to like this video. It helps more people discover real stories like Patricia's, where the truth refuses to stay buried. When the investigators pressed play on the footage, the room fell still. 30 minutes. That's all it took to destroy a life. The recording captured everything. Carrie's pacing footsteps, his circular accusations, Patricia's calm voice, her attempt to de-escalate, the sudden, deliberate silence right before the shot. There was no panic in his voice when it was over. No shock, just a chilling calm, the kind that only comes after something planned. The evidence was airtight. The video, the gun, his fingerprints, all undeniable. Detectives processed the house. No struggle, no defensive wounds, no sign of self-defense. Patricia had been cornered, not attacked, but executed. They collected her phone carefully, sealing it in evidence. The red light was still blinking when they turned it off. Neighbors told police they'd heard arguments before. Nothing violent, just muffled shouting, doors closing, the sound of a couple unraveling. They said Carrie was polite but distant, the kind of man you never truly knew. Patricia, on the other hand, was light. They remembered her smile, her morning jogs, the way she always waved. In the following weeks, detectives built a timeline. They found that Patricia had been recording several of their arguments for weeks, fearing where Carrie's rage might lead. In those clips, his anger followed a pattern: jealousy, control, confrontation, calm, repeat. And now, It had ended the only way patterns like that ever do, in tragedy. If this story feels like it's pulling you in, that's because it's real. Subscribe to Sinister Tales. It costs nothing, but it helps us keep telling stories that remind the world why awareness is survival. When the case went to trial, everyone thought it would be straightforward. Murder, caught on camera. A clear confession through action. But then came the twist. Carey's defense invoked Texas's sudden passion statute. They argued that he didn't plan to kill Patricia, that he acted in the heat of overwhelming emotion. It was a loophole wrapped in empathy, one that could turn a life sentence into 10 years. Prosecutors played the recording in court. The jury, all women, listened in silence. Some covered their faces. Others stared at the floor. When the final shot echoed through the speakers, the room trembled. But the law, as it's written, can turn murder into mercy if passion is proven. After hours of deliberation, the verdict arrived. Carey Birmingham was sentenced to 10 years in prison, eligible for parole in 10 years, for a life recorded, ended, and erased. Outside the courtroom, Patricia's family wept. Reporters surrounded them, asking questions no one should ever have to answer. Her sister said through tears, "He took everything," and they called it passion. The world took notice. True crime followers, legal analysts, and survivors of domestic abuse filled the internet with disbelief. The outrage wasn't just about the sentence, it was about the message that even when a woman captures her own death on camera, justice can still call it temporary madness. If you believe 10 years isn't justice, comment "Justice for Patricia" below. Every comment pushes her story to more people, and every view reminds the system that the world is watching. Carey was led away in handcuffs, expressionless. For Patricia's daughter, Olivia, that image became permanent. Her father disappearing behind a courtroom door while her mother's voice echoed forever through a phone recording. The case closed, but the silence remained. The kind that lingers not because you can't hear it, but because you can't forget it. And yet, Patricia's story didn't end there. Because after the verdict came the reckoning, not from the courts, but from those she left behind. Stay with us for the final chapter, the aftermath and the echo of justice. But before we go there, make sure you've subscribed to Sinister Tales and turned on notifications. Stories like Patricia's aren't easy to tell, but they need to be heard. Because justice doesn't always end with a verdict. Sometimes, it begins with remembrance. When the sentence was read, 10 years, the courtroom went silent. Not the stunned silence of disbelief, but the heavy kind, the kind that feels like a betrayal. Patricia's family sat motionless, tears rolling without sound. Her sister gripped her daughter's hand tightly, as if holding her was the only thing keeping the moment from collapsing completely. 10 years. That was the cost of a woman's life in the eyes of the law. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters gathered. But Patricia's daughter, Olivia, couldn't speak. Because what could she possibly say? Her mother was gone. Her father, the man who took that life, had just been promised freedom before her 20s were even over. That kind of pain doesn't form words. It forms scars. The Houston community reacted with heartbreak and outrage. Neighbors who had waved to Patricia on her morning walks stood on their porches in disbelief. Realtors who once celebrated her success came together to hold vigils, candles flickering in paper cups, tears reflecting in the light. They said her name out loud again and again, because saying it felt like keeping her alive. If you're watching this and you believe 10 years wasn't justice, pause for a second and hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that Patricia's story, and stories like hers, matter. Patricia's sister, Mary, refused to let the story end with a verdict. She started speaking out publicly, at events, in interviews, online. She talked about domestic abuse that hides behind respectability, about the kind of control that doesn't leave bruises but still breaks bones in the spirit. Her voice shook the first few times, but the more she spoke, the stronger she became. She said she owed it to her sister, to make sure people recognized the signs before it was too late. Olivia, now without both parents, tried to rebuild quietly. She spoke sparingly about that night, but when she did, her words carried weight. She said her mother taught her kindness, strength, and faith, and that's what she held on to. "I don't want people to remember her as just a victim," she said once. "I want them to remember how alive she was." Carey Birmingham began serving his sentence. 10 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. In the eyes of the law, he would pay his debt. But in the hearts of those left behind, the debt would never be cleared. Because justice measured in time will never balance the weight of a stolen life. If you believe every victim deserves more than a number in a courtroom, subscribe to Sinister Tales right now. We tell the stories others are too afraid to look at, the ones that reveal what really happens behind closed doors. As the years passed, Patricia's home was sold. New owners moved in, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded there. But those who knew her still drive by sometimes. They slow down, look at the front door, and remember, not the violence, but the woman who once filled that space with laughter. The house stands quiet, but to them, it's not just a house. It's a reminder that darkness doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it sleeps next to you. The case of Patricia Rici Birmingham continues to echo online, shared by advocates, discussed by survivors, studied by legal experts. They all ask the same haunting question: how can a murder, caught on camera, be reduced to passion? How can a woman's recorded final breath still not be enough to bring her full justice? Her story became a mirror, forcing everyone who heard it to confront uncomfortable truths about love, control, and how society excuses violence when it wears the mask of emotion. If Patricia's story has touched you tonight, share this video. Every share spreads awareness. Every view helps another person recognize the red flags before it's too late. And so, Patricia's voice continues to live, not through that recording, but through the people who refuse to let it fade. Her name still rises in conversations about reform, about justice, about how we treat domestic violence in this country. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a mother, a woman who built a life from the ground up, only to have it taken by the one who vowed to protect it. And maybe that's what makes her story so unforgettable. Because Patricia didn't just record her final moments. She left behind undeniable proof of how love, unchecked and twisted, can destroy everything it touches. The question that remains is one we all must answer. When the system calls it passion and the world calls it tragedy, who will call it what it really is, murder? If you're still here, thank you for watching. Honor Patricia's memory by subscribing to Sinister Tales, sharing this story, and turning on notifications so you never miss a new one. Because somewhere, right now, another woman is recording her truth, hoping someone will listen before it's too late. Because justice doesn't always begin in the courtroom. Sometimes it begins with you.